We continue the Shiur in Gemara. The Gemara says, when a guy wants to convert, then we are not supposed to encourage him. We're supposed to repel him as much as possible, to discourage him, tell him how difficult it is. But if that guy insists, he says he has complete faith in the Jewish religion, he has faith in Hashem, he wants to fulfill the mitzvot, he goes through the various tests, and finally he is converted. Once he becomes a ger, then the Torah says you must respect him for what he has done. And not just to respect him, but the Torah warns very strongly, very severely, about ever hurting the feelings of a ger. And we have warnings in the Torah about hurting anybody's feelings. But here it is so special that it's repeated again and again. We find in the Torah 36 times direct warnings and 10 additional times indirectly. It's a total of 46 times in the Torah, 46 mitzvot, warning a Jew not to hurt the feelings of a ger. One of the reasons is because of the fact that he has come from such evil, a life of evil, a life that's completely contaminated, unkosher spiritually and physically. He's broken away from it. The second reason is that the Jews should know that they were gerim too. The word ger means a stranger. They were gerim in Egypt, strangers there, and they should know what it feels like not to hurt others who are gerim. And that's why the lesson here is that a person should never insult someone, never call him a name with something that this person himself is guilty of. If a person has a fault, a shortcoming, he should not attack somebody else with the claim, with the insult that person has that same shortcoming. Don't use your mum, your fault, your shortcoming to insult somebody else with that. To the extent, the Gemara says that if a person has a blemish, his family is stained, a member of his family was put to death, they received the death penalty. In all cases, the person is put to death. The law says that the dead person must be hung after the death penalty. He must hang until nightfall as a lesson for others. So if a person had one in his family who was hung, that means it's a disgrace for his family. He should be careful never to speak of that to others. Not even to the extent, he shouldn't even use the words, hang up this fish, hang this fish on the wall. Something like that, where the word hung is being used, to completely hide his own shame. And since it is to our shame that we were gerim, we should never use that point, insult other gerim with that point. This is a very vital lesson, especially in our time where we find it prevalent among certain groups to insult gerim, to repel them, to refuse to accept them. They can never deny these powerful statements in the Torah about respect and consideration for gerim. The Gemara says that a storekeeper who sells foodstuffs, candies, he wants to increase his business. There is a machlok, a debate, whether he's allowed to hand out free candies, sweets to children to draw them to come to his store rather than to the store of his competitors. One rabbi says he's not allowed to do that because it's unfair business practice. A person must be fair, compete on a fair basis, not to use these tactics. And the Chachamim, plural, the rabbis say that it is permissible because he's doing no harm whatsoever. By the same token, we have the same machloket as to whether a person is allowed to lower his prices in order to compete. They cut his prices so that people will come flocking to his store rather than to others. And one rabbi says this is forbidden because he's going to spoil the market. He'll kill off the chance for other businessmen to make profits. This will lead to a price war, and they'll all come out losing. The Chachamim say the din is that he certainly is permitted to do this, and he deserves credit for it, because if they are selling items that are necessities and not luxuries, he's doing the people a favor to lower the prices where the poor, too, could afford to buy the necessities without hardship. Third item is whether a person can embellish the items, the product he is selling, to paint it up, make it look better. Here, if he does it, everything he sells, that's permissible. But if he has a barrel of fruit that he polishes up the top layer only, making a person think that the bottom layer is also as good, this is considered stealing. So in this case, it is forbidden. A person cannot beautify the superficial part, the exterior of an animal, to brush up the skin, the hair, the wool of a sheep, make it look like it's healthy, and to fool someone with that. The Gemara tells a story of a slave. In those days, there were slaves. It was permissible. Goyim, an Eved Akum, a guy that was a slave to Jews, a Jew could keep this slave, and once he got him, he was forced to keep him for the rest of his life. You cannot get rid of a slave. Once a slave, always a slave, no matter what color he is. So that freeing slaves is certainly no mitzvah. Today's fast day, not holiday, for the opposite of that. It should not be a celebration, but a sad day. This slave, this guy who was an old man and wanted to get a place to live, because as an old man who was free, he couldn't earn his livelihood. He wanted to get himself employed as a slave. Yet being old, how could he do this? He had a white beard. This, by the way, proves again that in the olden days, everyone wore beards. Every person, back in the days of Egypt, Paro, the Gemara says, had a very long beard. All the Goyim wore beards then. It was only much more recently that they began to use shaving implements. This old guy, very old man, had a white beard. In order to get himself accepted as a slave, as a worker, he dyed his beard black. And he came to one of the rabbis in the Gemara, he came to Rava, and he said to him, "Buy me as a slave." Rava said, "Why should I buy you as a slave? If I have money, I'd rather give it to my fellow Jews rather than to you. Go elsewhere." He came to Rav Papa, and Rav Papa bought him as a slave. One day, Rav Papa said to him, short time later, he said to him, "Go bring me some water and drink." So he left the room, removed the dye from his beard. He came back and said to him, "Don't you have a law that you're supposed to respect old age? I'm older than your father. How can you order me to bring you water and drink?" Rav Papa said, "I really fell in this time." Rava said, "There's a pasuk, tzadik mitzara nechlatz. A tzadik is saved from a tzara, from trouble, and someone else comes and takes his place." Rava said, "In my case, I was saved from being defrauded, fooled to buy the slave. Poor Rav Papa took my place, and he was taken in by him." The Gemara says we have a pasuk in the Torah, in the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments, which says, "Lo tignov," do not steal. That pasuk naturally does not deal with stealing money, because those commandments deal with laws that are punishable by death, like killing, adultery, or stealing. What kind of stealing is punishable by death? This means stealing a person. Kidnapping, the penalty for it is death. And of course, in the Torah we find the Torah very much condones, advocates capital punishment. The only deterrent to real crime is the penalty of death. So since the Lo Tignov in the Aseret HaDibrot deals with stealing a person or kidnapping, where do we have the law that negates, that forbids stealing of money or property. The Gemara says, we have a pasuk in the Torah which says, Lo tignovu. Lo tignovu, you should not steal. It's plural. You should not steal. The Gemara says this pasuk too could not be used for stealing money, because since we have another law which says that a Jew is forbidden to ever take a ribit, which means interest on a loan, it's a very serious crime, taking interest, lending money for interest, no matter what level of interest it is. It's very seriously forbidden, and it is considered one of the most serious crimes, one of the greatest punishments for that crime of taking interest. Now that means that a person is taking money illegally. Since we already have the law of interest, which says you cannot take money illegally, we don't need any law stating that it's forbidden to steal. That is understood already. So now what would this pasuk Lo Tignovu refer to? The answer is this pasuk tells us that you should not steal, not just by taking money from another person illegally. That, of course, we know. But not to steal from someone without the intention of stealing. Let's say that person is honest, would never dream of taking money from a second person, and he wants to tease him. So he takes away his watch or a different item, and he's just to see this person suffering, looking for this lost item, and then he says, here it is. I took it, here it is back, I had no intention of stealing it. About this, the pasuk says, you should not steal, even with the intention of returning it just to tease. And more than this, the Gemara says this pasuk refers to a case where the penalty for stealing the Torah is that the person steals $100, he must repay double, kefil, $200, or double the amount of whatever he steals. Now, a person, let's say, wants to do his friend a favor. He knows his friend will not accept a gift from him, so he deliberately steals $100 from him. He goes to court. The court penalizes him and orders him to pay double. He does it gladly because his intentions were for the opportunity of giving this friend in need an additional $100. He did it with pure intentions in order to give his friend money, to give him a gift which he would not have accepted otherwise, and still the Torah forbids this, because it still is included in the Isur, the sin of stealing, though it was not intended as such. Now, of course, we have to understand too, why doesn't the pasuk say Lo Tignov, do not steal? Why does it use it in the term of plural, Lo Tignovu? The answer is here that a person who would steal in this manner in order to tease someone, or in order to purposely give him a gift, he wouldn't want to be suspected by others of having really committed a sin of stealing. So first, he notifies other people, not the victim himself, but others, the group, I'm going to take this item without the knowledge of its owner, but on condition that I will return it shortly afterwards, or I will give him back double the amount. So we use the term Lo Tignovu plural because this is something that is done in public. Even that which is known in public and notified before it's publicized that he is not actually stealing, even there the Torah forbids it with an actual Lo Taseh, one of the negative commandments of the Torah. This is one of the 613 laws of the Torah. Yemena asks, we find a number of places in the Torah where a law is given, and in the law, in that parasha, the wording is, I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt. In places where it would seem completely irrelevant. Why bring it up in those spots? By the way, the Zohar Kadosh says that we find the number of times in the Torah that Hashem took you out of Egypt is exactly 50 times. 50 times that word is mentioned, that statement is made. And the reason for that is that this is Elohim. Elohim is Hashem, who is a judge, who judged harshly against the Egyptians, punished them, and in his judgment freed the Jews. That name of Hashem is called Zohar Kadosh Bina. Bina has It's the wisdom, or the 50 degrees of wisdom. So to show from which origin Hashem took the Jews out of Egypt, therefore it is mentioned 50 times in the Torah, exactly to correspond with the 50 degrees of wisdom. Now here the Gemara asks, 3 cases. We find that the law of taking the isur, the sin of taking interest, when the Torah forbids this, it says, because I, Hashem, took you out of Egypt. Second case we find by the mitzvah of tzitzit, the third parasha of Kriyat Shema. There too it says, I, Hashem, hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I took you out of Egypt. What does that got to do with the mitzvah of tzitzit? Third case, when the Torah warns against the person having false weights and measures, to keep honest weights, there again the Torah says, because I took you out of Egypt. The Gemara asks, what is the connection between Egypt, between the exodus from Egypt, and these 3 laws? The Gemara answers, this is the warning that Hashem says. Hashem says, I know that you know that these things are forbidden, but you may do this with the pretense. You pretend you're doing something that is honest. Actually, it's false. You're going to be able to fool people, but you cannot fool me. I, Hashem, who knew the truth in Egypt, I was able to detect the difference between an Egyptian man or child who was a bechor, the firstborn, and one who was not. I was able to know the difference. In some cases, it was impossible for any human being to tell. For example, the Egyptians are very loose in morals. So they had many women who were lax and who would have affairs with many other Egyptian men. You could have a woman have affairs with 10 men. She become pregnant and bear 10 children. Some cases, for this man, this was his first child. In some cases, it wasn't. Who could tell when this woman gave birth to these 10 children who the fathers were, whether they had children before or not? Now, bechor, the firstborn, means one who is firstborn to his father, in certain cases, in inheritance, or firstborn for the pidyon haben, Jewish law, for it's firstborn to the mother. Here, where the firstborn to the father too is killed, the Gemara says, now Hashem said, I knew that drop that was formed into a child. I knew whether that was a firstborn child to the father or not. I was able to detect. I can detect also the difference between one who takes interest in a hidden manner. How is that? It's permissible for a goy to take interest from a Jew, or vice versa. In other words, a Jew can lend a goy money for interest, or a Jew is allowed to borrow from a goy and pay him interest. Now, a person, a Jew, might pretend. He would say he has money, he's holding this money for a goy, belongs to a goy, and he'll lend it to a Jew for interest. So that Jew will pay the interest thinking he's paying it to a goy. He'll fool that person, Hashem says, but he will not fool me. I know when a person is committing this crime of pretending that it's Jewish money, that it's non-Jewish money when it's actually Jewish money. Just as I was able to detect the difference in Egypt between the firstborn and non-firstborn. Same thing too, Hashem says, the mitzvah of tzitzit, we don't have this today, of course, but the original mitzvah was a string of techelet, blue wool, on a tzitzit, which was made. That blue wool, of course, means that the string was dyed blue through the blood of the chilazon, a certain type of worm that appears in the Mediterranean Sea, or Yam Kinneret, the section of Zebulun, the northern part of Israel. Now this comes up from the sea once in 70 years. It's a very rare item. The blood of this chilazon is taken, mixed with other types of chemicals. The Gemara describes this, and Rambam speaks about it in detail, but it must be an exact mixture of these chemicals, dyes, together with the blood of chilazon. Only then is it kosher for techelet. Now this, of course, is expensive. there are people who use what is known as kla ilan. It's a special type of blue dye which resembles techelet so perfectly that it could be counterfeited and sold as techelet. Hashem says that I, who was able to detect the difference between a bechor and a non-bechor, firstborn and not firstborn, I will know who is selling tzitzit, techelet, falsely. You cannot fool me with the sale of techelet, selling this falsely, though a person, let's say if he wears this kla ilan, he doesn't use it to sell, he just wears it himself to show that he's wearing techelet, that would not be actually a sin. Because even in the olden days, it was a fact that the Torah said, I cannot steal techelet, you must have a thread of blue wool, but a person did the avad. If he didn't use the blue wool, just used regular lavan, white wool, he still is performing the mitzvah of tzitzit. Techelet is an additional mitzvah. So therefore the sin here is that he would sell this. Sell it, counterfeit, this counterfeit techelet. This, no one can tell the difference. Hashem says, I can tell the difference. And if you commit that sin, selling this kla ilan, I will know when to punish you. Of course, another point is, the question is, by the way, why should it be forbidden to use this kla ilan, this counterfeit techelet? If we analyze the mitzvah of techelet itself, the Gemara says in Chulin, why was techelet chosen? What's the reason for this color being chosen of tzitzit? The Gemara says because the techelet resembles the sky. The blue of the sky, and this resembles the sapphire, the diamond and sapphire with the luchot written on, and this resembles the kisei kavod, the throne of Hashem. And this means that a person looking at this techelet will remind himself that he must appear before the throne of Hashem in judgment, and this will bring him to Teshuva and avoid committing sins. So this is the reason for techelet. Now, if that's the reason, what's wrong in wearing counterfeit techelet? If it's only the color that resembles the throne of Hashem, why should it be a sin? The answer is there is a second reason too. This item is brought in one of the hidden midrashim, that the word techelet comes from the word like mishakela, which means the death of children. Techelet too is mechaleh, means to destroy, to wipe out. So this techelet itself is a reminder of the makat bechorot, the death of the firstborn in Egypt, and itself is this is a reason too why we have the law of the statement about the Egyptian firstborn in the parasha of Tzitzit. So since this is possible only with the actual techelet, because techelet is only that which comes from the dam chilazon, the blood of the chilazon worm, therefore this is not possible by kla ilan. So though that counterfeit color is good enough as far as resembling the heavenly throne, they are still lacking the mitzvah of reminder of the destroying the children of Egypt. And therefore, there is a sin to use it in general. The third item, two, the correct weights and measures. There are very simple ways for a person to falsify his weights, to place salt in hidden parts where it would weigh down. Hashem says you might fool people, but you cannot fool me when it comes to correct weights and measures, and I, who have punished the firstborn in Egypt, will punish those who falsify the weights and measures. The Gemara asks now, there's another place where we find the statement about Egypt. The case of unkosher fish, like eels, clams. Why does the Torah say there, Hashem speaks, because I am Hashem hama'aleh etchem, I brought you up out of Egypt. What does it got to do with that? The Gemara answers because this is one item where Hashem praises the Jews. Ma'aleh means, now means a very high quality. The Jews possess this very fine characteristic. for which Hashem says if they had just this one quality alone, I would still have taken them up out of Egypt. And that quality is that they are so different than the Goyim. Goyim who eat these disgusting type of foods, something which a Jew would not eat. The Jews will not eat this type of unkosher food, but that's just one part of the mitzvah, not eating it. The additional part is that the Jews are so refined and so pure that they actually detest this. They cannot even stand the thought of eating food of this type. And because the Jews are that refined and that pure, Hashem says that for that alone, I would take them, I like them enough to take them out of each just for that one quality alone. Now, in the law of Ribit, the Gemara says this sin is so serious that a person who takes the Ribit, aside from all the other penalties, one of the worst penalties is that he will not rise up at Tchiyat HaMetim. He will not come back to life. When all the dead come back to life after Mashiach comes, this is one sin where it says he will not rise up at Tchiyat HaMetim. There's a story, I don't like to bring inside jokes at the time of the Gemara, but still, this is it's that pertinent. There is a moral in this story too. It's worth even mentioning. And it's brought about one of the great tzaddikim of the past. It's not written in any sefer. It's just a story that's told from father to son, passed down. Years ago in Europe, it was customary that when a person died, there was a chavruta kadisha, a burial group, as we have today too, but they controlled the cemetery completely, burial plots. The person could not be buried unless he had the okay of this chavruta kadisha, this burial society. And they dictated price, they dictated place where a person could be buried, they had all power of this. This was agreed upon because they were all leading people in the community, very religious, most of them rabbis. But their word was final, law. Now it happened once that there was a man who was very wealthy and who was disliked in the community because he was a shylock. He would lend money and take a high rate of interest, illegally too, so therefore he was very bitterly despised in the community. And the time came when he died, the funeral had to be made, and this burial society said that they want an exorbitant price for his burial. They would sell this grave, this plot, his family, many tens of thousands of dollars. The family became incensed at this, and they said they're going to report this to the government. This is considered robbery. They'll report this to the government rather than to the chief rabbi there, which meant that they were jeopardizing this burial society, because the government could really punish them. The society said they're willing to go to trial for this case. They came before the governor. The governor was surprised, amused to see this case coming before him, and he said he'll hear both sides of the case. The family said, here's a case, their father lived in the community, he was entitled to a burial plot like anyone else, and the society wants an amazing, fantastic amount for it. The regular price of a plot there was about $50. Here, they want about $20,000 for it. What right do they have to take this price from their father, though he was wealthy, but not such an exorbitant price? The governor said, I heard your side of the story. Let's see the second side. Because I respect these rabbis. I know, I've heard about them. I know they're not thieves. They must have a valid reason. They said to the governor, yes, Your Honor, we do have a valid reason. And if you accept our faith, our line of reasoning according to our faith, you'll see that we are justified. Now, we sell these plots, but we know that they are sold only on a temporary basis, because our faith is implicit that there will come a time shortly, Mashiach will come, and then afterwards we'll have Tchiyat HaMetim, and then we'll come back to life. That means that we're not really selling the plot, we're just renting it for a short period of time. Therefore, the price is only $50. But this man was taking interest. The penalty is he'll never rise up Chiyat HaMitzim. He's taking this plot not for just a few years. He's taking it for a long time to come. Forever afterwards. We're taking a very small price, $20,000 forever for this grave plot. We think that the ratio, he's paying the right price. The governor smiled and said they're right, and if they want their father to be buried, they must pay the price that's asked of them. Of course, he meant this too as a lesson to others, not to take interest, certainly not at the exorbitant rate of interest they had taken. This story, the moral of the story, is a very true one, because the fact is, the Gemara says that one who takes interest is that person that no matter how good he is, but Chiyat HaMitzim is not for him. So great is the penalty. Well, the Gemara will bring later statements to substantiate this, and showing how serious the sin is. After all, why should this be worse than other crimes? Why should this be worse than a person who eats unkosher, for example, or who doesn't keep the holidays? The Gemara will explain that later. First, the Gemara tells us a different story, a case at hand that could come up. It could happen many times. People traveling in the desert. This can be in any country at all. Any desert where people get lost and they cannot find their way out of this desert. They have no means of transportation. And it's a long trek to get out of this desert. And of course, in time they will reach the end of the desert. But the question is whether their water will hold out. The Gemara says we have a case of two people traveling in the desert. One of them has a canteen of water, and the other does not. Now, if this person would be kind, benevolent, and share the canteen with his friend, the result would be that certainly both of them would die. They could not reach civilization. If he alone would drink it, he would live. He'd be saved. He'd get to civilization before he'd pass out. The other person would have to die. The question is, should he witness the death of his friend, save his own life, or should he share the water, let them both die together? Gemara says that one rabbi, Batuda, says it is better that both should drink and die, rather than have one of them see his friend die because he deprived him of water. Not that if he gave him the water, the person would live, but that he was selfish to save his own life, and not to think that perhaps they might be saved if he held out a little while longer. By sharing it, there might be a chance, ever so slight, that they might get to a place where they'd find water, but he chose to have his friend die to be sure that he would be saved. But the Torah says both should drink and let both die. And Yaakov says, the pasuk says in the Torah, "V'chei achicha imach," your brother should live with you. Take care of him, to give charity to those who are poor, that they too may live. It doesn't say just your brother should live. It says your brother should live with you. That's after you. Your life comes before the life of your brother. If there is only one canteen of water and you have it, the Kibbutz says you're not supposed to die when it does no good to your friend. You are justified in keeping the water for yourself and let your brother die. That's the law of the Akiva. And the Yefed should explain this, in fact, is so. However, what if the water was water they were both partners in? It belonged to both of them alike. What happens then? Should both die, or should arrangements be made to have one of them live? In that case, if the water belongs to both, no one can have a claim on it. Each one is entitled to have his half of the water. However, there is a chidush. One of the rabbis of Shulchan says that this is definite. It is permissible for both of them to draw lots. They may draw lots, winner take all. This they are allowed, though it means that one of them will certainly die. If this is permissible, that's only if the water belongs to both. But if the water belongs to only one of them, that person may legally, according to the Akiva, drink the water entirely himself to save himself, though his friend will have to die. Yemena says that Rav Yosef once had people who owed him money. He could not collect, so he would take the slaves of those people and use them for work, have them work for him. He would take them by force. Rava came to Rav Yosef, Rava's son, and he asked him, why do you do that? What right do you have to take these people's slaves? It's their property. So he said, I'm not doing any harm to this person, because I'm doing him a favor. Nachman said once that a slave is not worth the bread that he eats. He produces less than the amount that it costs to sustain him. And this, of course, is fact, because the Gemara says that when Hashem gave down laziness to the world, this characteristic of laziness, 9/10 of it went to slaves, and 1/10 remained for the rest of the world. So I'm doing him a favor by taking the slave. I have to feed him. I get less product out of the slave than the amount it cost me to feed him. So Rava asked him, but this doesn't apply to all slaves. Nachman's own slave was a lazy person who liked to play rather than to work. He had trouble with him, therefore he made the statement. Yosef answered, still, the Gemara also says that one who takes the slave of his friend by force and does work with him, he does not have to pay for it, because the friend is very happy to see that his slave is taught discipline, not to be lazy. Let somebody else who knows how to discipline him take him and make him work, force him to work. So therefore I'm not doing any harm, I'm not taking anything for this person. I'm doing something which is a favor for him. Rava said, still, it is forbidden, because when are you allowed to take a person's slave, work with him, even gain through it, only if he does not owe you money. But if he owes you money and you do this, without deducting this amount from the debt, it looks like looks like you're taking interest, and therefore it is forbidden. The Gemara says there's a pasuk which tells us about how big the mitzvah is to lend money. To lend money, of course, without interest. The pasuk says you should lend money to the poor of your nation with you. The Gemara explains, if two people come to borrow money from a person, one is a Jew, one is a goy l'havdil, naturally the Jew comes first. If one is a poor man, one is a rich man, both Jews, the poor man comes first, because he needs it more badly. Well, the rich man needs it for business, but still the poor one comes first as far as the mitzvah is concerned. If you have two poor people coming to you, one is from your city, the other one is from out of town, and one's from your city, you must give money to first, or lend money to first rather than the outsiders. If they are both from your city, one is a relative and one is not, the relative comes first. The blood relatives come before any other ones. Now, of course, the Gemara says these are items we have to know. But why does the Gemara tell us that a Jew comes before a goy? Why should we ever dream otherwise? What is the chidush there? The Gemara says, even if it's at your expense, in other words, the Jew will borrow money from you free, without interest. The goy offers interest, you have only enough to lend to one person, you must sacrifice your profits with the goy and lend the money to a Jew. These statements about lending money to a goy for interest, throughout the Gemara, of course, the Shulchan says that a person who lends money for interest, even to a goy, where it is permissible according to law, could never prove successful in the end. He's going to lose that money because that's cursed money. It's tainted with a word that is so evil that though it's legal in the case of a goy, it still is not right, still will not prove beneficial. Again, of course, the law is that it is permissible, but it should be avoided. This the Gemara says in Yaakov. The Gemara itself says there, Ashrei to that person who will not lend money, kaspola natan beneshach, he will not give his money for interest even to a goy. Then he explains what is so bad about lending money for interest. Yuna shows that a person who calls his friend a rasha, that's a very serious crime, and the court has a right to punish that person most severely. That's if he calls him a rasha. The Yuna says, look at the blindness of these people who lend with interest. How do they do it? They write up a contract. If this person borrowed money from this person, they bring witnesses, they bring a person to write the contract, a sofer, they bring ink, they bring a pen, they write, they sign. What do they sign? That this person is a kofir. He does not believe in Hashem. Here you call a person a rasha. It's that serious a crime. Here they are signing to the fact, testifying this person is a kofir. Why is he called a kofir in Hashem? Because, as we said, a person who lends money for interest, that person does not rise with tchiyat hametim. It means it's against the main principle of the future action of Hashem. Hashem created life, took away life, and from that same dead person who took away life, he will then again later produce life. He'll re-infuse him with that life he had before. Here's a person who's a kofir because he will never come back to life against the main tefillah, the prayer of the Jews, the hope of the Jews, looking forward to the miracle of Tchiyat HaMetim. So this is the blindness of those who lend money for interest. The Gemara says that the person who lends money for interest, not only does he lose out Tchiyat HaMetim, but he loses out on his own wealth. The money that he earns will be lost, not just the money from interest, but even the principal too he's going to lose eventually. The Gemara asks, there are other people too who lose money. What is this different? There are many sins a person will lose money for. The Gemara answers those who lose money for other sins, they could get the money back. They could become wealthy again. But a person who lends money for interest, he will lose the money and never get it back. So serious is this crime of interest. Rabbi Arizal says that it's not just giving. Lending, giving is the same sin. The lender and the borrower are both guilty. It's not just returning interest by money itself. A person lends money to someone and does not take any interest at all. He lends 100 to get back 100. And the borrower feels indebted to this person, and he speaks to him very politely. He greets him with a kind smile, giving him shalom. But ordinarily he wouldn't have said this. This is called ribit devarim. The words are interest. This too is considered interest. One additional word is considered interest. And therefore the din is, it's very important to know, that since interest in words too is also considered a sin of interest, when a person lends somebody money, the borrower is forbidden to say the words, thank you. Because that thanks is interest on a loan. The person should be very careful never to say thanks for a loan, because this is borders within the border of interest. Mishumi Chayezal says further that those who lend money for interest lose much more than they gain, as we said. In other words, the loss later on, the Gehinnom, the punishment, and a loss in this world far outbalances whatever gain they can hope for, which means how foolish they are. In addition, he says how evil they are, that they speak, this is a very rough statement. They speak against Moshe Rabbeinu and the Torah. Because Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Torah in which he taught that interest is considered a These people say that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote in the Torah that it's a sin. If Moshe Rabbeinu would have known how good it is, much profit there is in the taking of interest, he would not have written these words. That's a shalom. So evil and so deep is their atheism, that kefirah in the Torah against Moshe Rabbeinu, against Hashem. This shows the extent of the isur of the bit. Therefore, the Gemara says that not only words, if the sin is so serious, not only are words considered interest, but even actions are considered interest. The person knows that he owes money to someone, and by just shaking his head to him or showing himself, then this would appease the person who he owes money to. This too is forbidden. Any slightest trace of interest is forbidden. But the Arizal adds that the taking of interest is sinful, and what is the point of taking interest? Why does a person take interest? Because he has to wait for his money. This waiting, therefore he wants pay. The opposite is one who has emunah. True emunah of the Jew is when a person does a mitzvah, he's like lending Hashem. He's giving Hashem actions with what he possesses, or giving tzedakah, for example, giving charity, and he is willing to wait for his reward in olam haba. This shows a true faith in Hashem. There is a case of willingness to wait purely through a faith in Hashem. That is the true emunah, and this is the main lesson of the bit. Show the opposite in kedusha. The kedusha of true emunah in Hashem, words of the Torah, and that through this emunah, the person will be zocher to tchiyat hametim, and prior to that, very shortly, we should be zocher to see the rebuilding of Zion, rebuilding the Bet Mikdash, the Biat Mashiach Canaan, the Mehera. Amen. We continue the Shi'ur in Gemara. The Gemara says that lending someone money is performing a mitzvah. It's one of the major mitzvot in the Torah. At the same time, this mitzvah, if done wrongly, can turn into a very serious sin. If a person lends someone money, he should be very careful not to do more harm than good by appearing before this person constantly and asking for his money back, harassing him if the money wasn't paid on time. This means, of course, if the person really doesn't have the money, he's innocent in that sense, he's not doing it deliberately. He doesn't have the money to pay it back, He should not harass him. He should not constantly show himself in front of him, because this causes undue and unbearable embarrassment. The Rebbe says in Tehillim that one of the great sufferings is when there stands above a person one who demands payment. And this, he says, Benu be'esh u'b'mayim. This is like going through the tortures of fire and water. Why fire and water? Because according to the Gemara, according to Kabbalah, always white, the symbol white is water. Symbol of red is fire. Now, when a person is embarrassed, when there's a demand made of him to pay, if he doesn't have the money to pay it, he's very much embarrassed. So his face turns red in embarrassment, then it turns white. The blood drains from his face. So this is the tortures, it's called the tortures of fire and water, red and white. And that is why a person should be very careful, extremely so, not to hurt someone's feelings, even if that person is indebted to him. If you cannot pay back the money, you can't get it back anyhow. Be careful how you treat the other person, because in embarrassing him, the entire debt is not worth it. Even if it says, lending a person money, he is performing a mitzvah, but at the same time, he should be careful, again, that it should not turn out into something evil. When you lend someone money, you must make sure that you have witnesses who will testify to the fact that this money has been lent. And then, when you demand payment, you will have proof that you lent this money to that person. You cannot collect without proof. And therefore, it is incumbent upon a person to see to it that when he lends someone money, there should be witnesses present, or there should be a contract drawn up, a statement, an IOU statement, that this person has borrowed money, he owes this much money to the lender. The Gemara says that if a person lends money to someone and does not have witnesses present at the time that this loan is made, the lender is committing the sin of lefnei iver, placing a stumbling block, a trap before a blind person. Meaning, he's going to lead the borrower into committing a sin. Because if he forces this temptation upon him, there were no witnesses. The person might be basically honest. But if he doesn't have the money to pay it back, he'll find a means of evading payment completely. There were no witnesses who saw this loan being made. So when the lender asks for his money, the borrower will say, it's a lie, I never borrowed it. There's nothing the lender can do about that. Now, he is committing the sin of leading this person to sin, because he's going to make him lie, deny the fact that he borrowed, commit a sin, and he caused it because of the fact that he did not have witnesses present at the time of the loan. So one who lends money without having witnesses present, that person is committing the sin of leading someone else into sin. The Gemara says, in addition, he brings upon himself a curse for many people. Because, without witnesses, without proof, he's going to ask the borrower for the money. The borrower will deny it. People will say, this man is evil. Why do you come to ask someone money when he doesn't owe it to you? So they'll curse this person for it, and he's being cursed in vain. He doesn't deserve it, because he actually did lend this person the money, but he brought it upon himself. The question, by the way, is, the Gemara says that what is in a curse? Is a curse something to be feared? The Gemara says it is better to be cursed than to curse. Better to receive a curse than to give a curse. Because a curse that is given without any reason, and that curse returns to the person who emitted that curse. And a curse that is given b'chinam, without reason, can never come true. So why does the Gemara say he brings a curse upon himself? Why should it bother him if people curse him? One answer is that there might be a chacham, a Talmud chacham, among those who would be provoked enough, be angered enough, to curse this lender also. Who is the lender? Usually a rich person. The borrower generally is a poor person. They'll always take the part of the poor person. There's no proof. The poor person says, I never borrowed the money. So Talmud Chacham might let out of his mouth a curse against this person. The Gemara says that the curse of the Talmud Chacham comes true even if it is in vain, even if it's undeserved, as we find in the case of Yaakov Avinu, when he placed the curse and it came true on his wife Rachel. So therefore, this may be a curse that comes from the Talmud Chacham, which would come true. The lender is guilty because he brought it upon himself, for not having taken care to see that there are witnesses, that there is proof of this law. And this is a statement by the rabbis of the Gemara. The Gemara says that the rabbis of the yeshiva of Rav Ashi told Rav Ashi about Ravina, the second rabbi. These are the two last rabbis of the Gemara. They're the ones who compiled the 60 Gemara. They told Rav Ashi that Ravina is very particular about fulfilling every word in the Gemara, all the words of the rabbis. One day Rav Ashi sent a messenger to Ravina. This was Erev Shabbat. He was in a hurry. And he said to, this messenger said to Ravina, the name of Rav Ashi, please send me 10 zuzim, it's 10 silver coins, because I have a wonderful opportunity to buy a certain plot of land. I must have these 10 silver coins to buy it with. Ravina said, send me the witnesses, and let's write a contract on this loan and have it signed in front of witnesses. Rav Ashi sent back, me, you say it to? You have to have witnesses and a signature from me? You don't trust me? Chief rabbi of just the greatest rabbi alive at that time. Ravina sent back, you especially, because you are so concerned, so occupied, so absorbed in your study, in learning Torah, that it's much easier for you to forget. Well, time will come when I'll ask you for payment. You will not remember. You'll say, you don't recall. You don't remember borrowing from me. What will happen then? People will rise up and curse me for having demanded payment of Rav Ashi. So it will bring a curse upon me. Therefore, I want to be sure that even you, and you especially, there is a contract signed with witnesses so that this trap cannot take place. This is what was meant by Ravina obeying every one of the laws of the rabbis of the Gemara. In this case, too, is particular. But it also shows that even the greatest people, the most trustworthy people, should not take chances. If ever you lend money, be sure that you have a signature for this loan, because it is very easy for a person to forget. And if a person forgets, a lot of problems arise at the time of payment. Gemara says there are three types of people, three cases of people who come before the court with a complaint and they scream. They scream at a loss that they're suffering or at a type of suffering they're enduring, and a court will refuse to answer them, will refuse to speak to them. The court throws them out. Meaning if these three people, too, come with a cry, but we throw them out because we say you have brought it upon yourself, you have no one to blame but yourself. Therefore suffer. Who are these three? First one is a person who has money and lends it without witnesses. This man will come to court and say, I lent a person money, I want to collect my money, and we say nothing doing. If it is true, as you claim, that you did lend a person money, then we can do nothing for you because it's your fault. You should have had witnesses, you should have had a contract signed. Second case is one who takes a master upon himself. He himself draws one to be lord over him. What is this case? Two possibilities. One, where a person tries to avoid having to lend people money, and then he comes to them and says, lend me a certain amount of money. I know you have money, thus I've seen it. And this man says, well, it's not my money, it belongs to a certain goy. I'm holding it for him. This way he evades having to make a loan. He says this to a few people. He avoids having to make the loan. But eventually this goy hears about this, he comes and says, the money you have is mine. And I have witnesses who testify to it. And there's nothing you can do about it. This guy has a powerful claim. His own confession, his own admission is as strong as any number of witnesses. Now he'll have to lose that money. He'll come before court and cry that it's his, the entire thing is an error. And the answer is, nothing you can do about it. You brought it upon yourself. Second case, a very bitter case, is where a father who has children and wants to be kind to the children, rather than have the children go through litigation, court proceedings after his death to receive the inheritance, he signs over all his properties to his children while he is still alive, figuring that he can hold on to it. Meanwhile, when he passes away, it becomes the children's property automatically, signed over to them. Little does he realize that a child does not have the feelings towards a parent that a parent has towards a child. A parent will never do a child out of any money that he has, any property that he has. On the contrary, he'll always try to add to it. A father supports a child constantly, even after the child is fully grown, and gives whatever aid, assistance, financial or otherwise, that he could. When it comes to a child helping a father, the story is very much the contrary. The famous saying that one father can easily support 10 children. 10 children cannot support one father. The feelings of a child to a father is the child leaves the father's home, or this, of course, does not reflect upon all children, chas v'shalom. There are many who are good, who are obedient, who are respectful. But this happens in many cases. There's many a case where a child has little regard for a parent and looks towards the day when he can receive the inheritance from the parent. Many a child who is a spendthrift, a wastrel, that he's given the opportunity to become the owner of the father's estate during the father's lifetime, he'll take advantage of that and take the estate for himself immediately. The father will then come to court and claim that the entire thing was an error. He didn't mean it really. He meant it to take effect after his death. The court says, you signed over your estate, your wealth, your possessions to your children. You brought it upon yourself. There's no one in this court that can help you. This is the second case. Third case, the Gemara says, is the case of a man who comes to court crying that his wife makes his life miserable. She orders him around, she makes a servant, a slave out of him. He can't take this domineering wife of his. The Gemara says the court throws him out. The Beit Din throws him out of court, saying you brought it upon yourself. Not because you married her. You were justified marrying her. Of course. Because this is your zivug. It's your mate. She is destined to be your mate, but she's not destined to be your master. On the contrary, the Torah says, Hu yimshol bach. Rule is, man shall rule over woman, husband over wife. If a man is that small, he's that weak, that he becomes subordinate to his wife, then he deserves his lot. He deserves what he gets from her. So that the court refuses to listen to his claims, to his complaint, and to his cries. He brought it upon himself, through his own weakness, his own weak nature. These are the three cases the Gemara says where they cry and they are not answered. And of course, this means too that even in heaven, the heavenly court refuses to accept the claims of these people. Of course, these people are guilty in their misfortune. Gemara says is another case of lending money, a strange and interesting type of case. A man lends someone $100. This was a legal loan. There's no question about witnesses. There was a contract signed. The borrower does not deny the fact that he owes the $100. The only thing is there was no stipulation as to the type of payment. But let's look at the nature of this case. The lender was not a wealthy person. He extended himself. He took $100 out of his own possessions, his own savings, and as a favor, as a mitzvah, he lent it to a friend who needed the money. Now, he needs that $100. He's not that wealthy, he can do without it. So when the time comes to receive this money in payment, he can then fill the vacancy that he made caused by lending this money. But instead of paying back the $100 in a lump sum, the borrower pays it back, let's say, at $1 a week. After 100 weeks, the lender has the $100. Let us say that the lender lent this money on condition the $100 will be paid back 100 weeks from now, at one time, one lump sum. In other words, he received the same $100 within the stipulated time. At the same time, the Gemara says, this lender has literally lost his $100. Because if he gets it back in one lump sum, he has the $100 back again. If he gets it back $1 a week, that dollar becomes dissipated. It gets lost in the shuffle. You don't feel the profit, the value of the dollar becomes spent. At the end of 100 weeks, he has nothing to show for this money. So he complains to the borrower, I don't want this dollar. You hold on to it. Wait until the time is up, and then pay me the entire sum at one time. The borrower says, I am allowed to pay you back before the time, anticipate the payment, and I want to pay it out small sums rather than one lump sum, despite the fact that it will prove a loss to you. This is nothing legally that the lender can do about this. He is forced to take this money in drips, little bits at a time, though it means that it will result in a complete loss of the money to him. He can only have tarumot, which means he can have hard feelings against the borrower. Well, hard feelings means that in court, in the earthly court, the borrower can do nothing at all. That is, the lender can do nothing at all. The lender can bring no claim against the borrower. There's nothing in law's legal point that can be brought against this borrower. But this hurt feelings, even as says the borrower should be careful of. Because though the law is on his side, he is hurting the feelings of a Jew, and in heaven this may prove a serious point against him. So we have this law that in a case like this, the lender is forced to take back the payments, small payments, and there's nothing you can do about it, but at the same time, advice to the borrower, you're hurting a person's feelings, and not just feelings, because you're causing this person to lose the money, and therefore be careful, because there might be judgment in heaven against you. At the same time, we learn a lesson from economics, that a person should be careful, if he does lend money, not to agree to have small payments made, because he's going to lose that money eventually. You take the money back in small payments, you will not feel that money, and it will gradually be spent. In the interim, you'll find yourself without the amount you had. This is advice, monetary advice. The Gemara now tells the case of Rabbi Nachman, who once hired workers to carry a barrel of wine for him. These were porters. And these porters were neglectful. They were careless. They dropped this barrel of wine. It broke. The wine was lost. The barrel was destroyed. And it was worth a lot of money. These porters had no money to pay it. So Aharon took their coats as payment for the wine. These porters came to Rav, the chief rabbi, and they complained. They said, he took our coats from us. Why should we suffer a loss? Rav called the Rav of Nachman, and he said to him, return the coats to those porters. Rav Nachman asked Rav, is that the law? What kind of a law is that? If they caused damage out of neglect, they must pay for the damage. I took what's rightfully mine. I took payment. Rav said, yes, you're right. You're very right that the din, in din you are right. But you being a Talmid Chacham should go beyond the limit of the law. Do better than the law requires. A person should never follow the din strictly to the letter of the law. A person should be a chassid, that means better, more religious, more refined in dealing with people than the law requires. Therefore, return the coats to them. Do not take payment for the loss they incurred. So he gave the coats back because he wanted to fulfill the mitzvah of being a chassid. Then these porters continued and said to them, we're very poor. We worked all day. We're hungry. We didn't get paid today. So Rav said to Rabbi Nachman, pay them the wages for carrying your barrel of wine. Rabbi Nachman said, I didn't charge them for the loss. I have to pay them wages yet for something that I gained nothing from and get a loss through it? So Rav said, yes, there's another posek which says you should be a chassid and a tzadik. Both. Go better than limit the law. In one case, not to charge them for their misdeed. Second case, to have pity upon them. They did work hard. See that they are given enough stipend to be able to buy food. They shouldn't go hungry. And of course, he fulfilled this. And here we learn how great the rabbis of the Gemara were, and the lesson they teach us. A person should always see to it to possess a high degree of kindness. Now, this kindness is not in vain. Remember always that Hashem judges a person midah keneged midah, measure for measure. If a person is cruel, if a person is harsh, then in heaven the decree is, let's be harsh with this person too. Just as he treats others, so too will he be treated. The person by nature is very soft, kind, compassionate, he has pity, goes out of his way to help others, and heaven judging him, the decision in heaven is, let's treat him as he treated others. He was always kind, he always had pity on others, let's have pity upon him. He is suffering, let's remove the cause of his suffering. Or he committed sins, let's be lenient with him for the sins he committed. He forgave others, let's forgive him too. This is the lesson that the Gemara teaches us. A person should always be better than the law requires. This manner, he'll elevate himself to a type of nature that will be so pure and so good, we become a tzadik, and in turn will be treated that way in heaven. The Gemara says in the pasuk in Tehillim, the chapter which starts with the word Bachi Nafshi, where it says Tashet Choshech Bihilayla, darkness becomes night, and brought to the most Kochai to Ya'ar. During the night, the wild animals of the forest come out. These nocturnal animals begin to prowl in the forest. By day, they are asleep. At night, they come out, these wild animals. Then, Tizrach HaShemeshi Asefun, when the sun shines, they are gathered in, and they return to their lairs. Gemara says this, King David is not speaking just about the nature of animals in the forest. He is hinting at something much deeper than this. When he says darkness and night, this refers to the Risha'im. In the darkness, in the night, the evil time, meaning, when is it dark? This world, this life, is a life of darkness, bitterness, suffering. As Rabbi Arizal said, this world is called Gehinnom. This world is a world in which the Risha'im prowl and commit their evils, perpetrate their evil deeds. This world of darkness means that for the Risha'im, it's dark. There are two kinds, we use the word here, darkness and night. This means that a person, when it's very dark, a person cannot see anything at all. He is completely blinded. When night comes, when it's not completely dark, pitch black, then he is not blinded, but he could be misled. He could see something, he might see a post, he might mistake it for a person. He can be mistaken in what he sees. His vision is not clear. This is the case of Risha'im. There are some who are completely blind to what is right and what is wrong, and there are some who imagine things. They imagine that what they're doing is good when actually it's evil. And this is done, of course, through habit. The person who commits a sin once has a pang of conscience. If he repeats that sin many times, he begins to believe that there's no sin, there's no crime involved. He can continue doing it without feeling himself doing anything wrong. So this is the darkness of the night, in which this world, this life, where the Sha'im go out like the wild animals in the forest to commit their crimes. But when the sun shines, which means in Olam Haba, the sun shines for the tzadikim. There, it is the place for tzadikim who have worked hard, la'avodato adei erev, who have worked till evening. Those who worked hard until evening, for them the sun begins to shine, which means tzadikim who worked during this lifetime. Until evening means sunset, when the sun sets for them. It means the life ends, they worked hard until the very end. Very end means that a person could be a tzadik all his life, and then on the end of his life he might turn evil. You can have a tzadik become a rasha at the end of his life. Just as you can have a person being a rasha all his life and then doing Teshuva. So too here it requires a person's being pure until the very last day of his life. And those are what tzadikim, until evening, till the end of their lifetime, and then the sun first begins to shine. When they leave this world, they leave a world of darkness and evil. They come out into the bright sunshine, bright light of Gan Eden, which is reserved for these tzadikim. The Yemena tells us a story that is brought in reference to this point, about the Sha'im that prowl as wild animals do and attack people, attack innocent victims. Is so prevalent today. Muggers, thieves, bandits. The Yemena tells about Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai had a son, Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who was very holy, extremely so. He had spent 13 years in a cave with Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. And in the Zohar Kadosh we find that he was the greatest rabbi alive at that time, next to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. In fact, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai once said that when Avraham Avinu asked Hashem, if you find 50 tzadikim, will you save the city of Sodom? If you find 45, if you find 40, if you find 10, will you save them? Shimon ben Yochai said, now, if Hashem would not save the entire world from destruction because of 10 tzadikim that exist, he will still save it because of 2. Myself and my son, we 2 are enough. Our zechut is enough to save the entire world from destruction if there is a gezerah decree against them. So great tzadikim were Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and his son. Now the Yemena says that after the Shimon ben Yochai his talkut, when he passed away, Rabbi Shimon was walking the street and he met a worker, one who worked for the government. And this person worked as a detective went out to catch criminals. And he asked this detective, how do you go about catching criminals? Aren't the criminals like wild animals in a forest? How do you capture a wild animal? Secondly, how can you detect between good and bad? You might have a person you might think is evil, actually he's innocent. How do you know that you don't take an innocent person and bring him into the king? In those days, if a criminal was caught, the penalty there was death. There was no two ways about it. The Romans would put a criminal to death. You might be putting to death innocent people. So this detective said, well, what can I do? I'm ordered by the king. I have no alternative. I cannot escape my job. The king has given me an order to act as a detective, and I'm forced to bring in whoever I think is guilty. I might make errors, but what can I do? How can I avoid this? What advice could you give me in detecting whether a person is guilty or innocent? As I said, there is a way of telling. You want to bring in criminals, you go to a restaurant or a bar in the morning, and you study the people sitting at this bar. And you eliminate, by process of elimination, you arrive at the criminals. The person sitting there is either a Talmid Chacham, or he's a day worker, or he's a night worker. If he's neither one of those three, he must be a criminal. Because why would he be sitting in a bar at that time in the morning? And there's much more to it than this, but in brief, this advice, detailed, you find is extremely clever advice, and this detective was very happy to hear this, and word got back to the king about this advice. The king said, why should lose the one who gave this advice? Let him be the one to carry it out. He's that clever, let's appoint him as a detective. So Rabbi Nachman was appointed as a detective by the king. He went out to catch criminals. And of course he did bring in criminals. These criminals were all Jewish, meaning they were put to death by the king. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Kercha sent a note to Rabbi Elazar, the son of Arizal. This note said, you vinegar, son of wine. Vinegar, product of wine. Meaning your father was wine. Wine stands for a tzadik. Vinegar means a tzadik who turned sour, who was no longer a tzadik, chas v'shalom. Your father was a tzadik. You are the opposite. Because, how do you dare to hand over people of Hashem, a nation of Hashem, Jews, to their death? How do you give Jews over to their death? Rabbi Elazar sent back a note saying, I'm not handing over Jews to their death. I am simply purifying, helping the owner. There is a vineyard. The owner of this vineyard stands for the world. Owner of the vineyard is Hashem. I am assisting in seeing that all the thorns in this vineyard should be cleaned out. To keep this world clean, have only pure people. I'm helping to clean out the Rishaim, only the Rishaim for this world, in the world of Hashem. But Yeshua ben Kercha sent back a note again and said, let the owner of the vineyard come and clean out his own thorns. Hashem is the one that punishes. Hashem is the one that puts to death. You are not made ruler of the world to decide who is good and who is not, who deserves death and who is not. The point here, of course, main point was, that what he meant was that how do you know that you are not taking innocent people and putting them to death? If they are really the Shem who deserve death, well, there's no loss. How can you be sure? You can only judge in probability. Chances are that you are, as a good detective, you're catching the guilty ones. How can you be certain that every one of them is guilty? What if you have one innocent Jew and you think you have evidence against him, you deliver him to the king, this Jew is put to death. You're taking him tzadik and having him die. So Rabbi Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon heard this, but he could not leave his position. However, he felt very much hurt by this message, the severity of this wording. He went on, and one day, an ordinary person, a laundryman, met him, and he said to him, Rabbi Shimon, how do you do, vinegar son of wine? He dared to use those words to this holy tzadik. Rabbi Elazar said, this person has so much chutzpah, so much arrogance, he must be a very big rasha. He told his assistants, detectives, take him in. Take him before the king. They captured him, took him before the king, and of course he was sent to the gallows to be hung. Rabbi Elazar then realized what he had done. Here he took a person who just called him a name, sent him to die. So he went after him and tried to buy him his way out, to ransom him, to redeem him for the king at a price, to give his own money to save this man's life, but it was too late. It was impossible. He couldn't save the man's life. Once he gave him into the king, this meant certain death. So he stood there while he was being hung. He stood there crying. This person, perhaps he's innocent, going to his death because of me. So people came to Rabbi Elazar and they said to him, Rabbi, do not feel bad at all, because we know, we are witnesses that this person and his son, both of them, committed a double crime. They committed a crime of adultery on Yom Kippur. So those are two crimes that both deserve death. Therefore, unknowingly, you have brought to justice a person who's dead anyhow. Don't feel badly about it. There was nothing wrong in what you did. Because I felt very happy and said, now I really feel perfect inside, because if in a case like this, where there's a doubt, I was in doubt, and yet it turned out that I was right, surely where I am certain that I'm right, I surely am right. So I don't fear any possible retribution, any possible punishment later on. I am certain that a person that commits crimes, the penalty is later that the worms eat his body. The worms rule over him. He said, I'm certain that no worm will ever touch my body. Still, Rabbi Elazar was uncertain. He wanted to be sure. How do you test to find out? Here's a strange case. We find that how advanced they were in those days. This is a case that happened nearly 2,000 years ago. He had an operation performed, and he had removed from his body the fats, some of the fats internally. He placed this flesh, fats, in the sun, where it could draw worms, and it remained, or where it could spoil. Of course, it's the bacteria which are also worms that spoil flesh or meat. He had it lying there in the sun. It did not spoil. This was in the summertime, the month of Tammuz Av. It was lying there in the sun during that time, a long period of time, and it did not spoil. So he said, in that case, I am certain that what I did was pure, because my body is that holy that no worms can come to it. Even it says there was another Rabbi Ishmael Rabbi Yossi also who had the same thing happen to him. He was also very wise. The king took him and commandeered him drafted him to becoming a detective. One day, Eliyahu Navi met him, and he said to Rabbi Ishmael, how long more will you be giving over the Jews, the nation of Hashem, to their death? Rabbi Ishmael answered, what can I do? It's the command of the king. How can I evade this duty? Rabbi Navi answered, your father before you once had a case where he was forced to flee the country. He went to a different country. You can do the same thing. You can flee, go to a different country and hide out there until the king dies. You're free to come back. Which means, of course, that this is only a human king, a mortal. A human king, a person could escape from a human king. The lesson is that this king, you can run away from him, you can hide out, you can avoid danger to yourself, you can't escape completely, but you can never escape from Hashem. You can never hide out from Hashem. You go to the deepest recesses of the earth, furthest tunnels, deepest caves, wherever you go, pitch blackness, Hashem will see you, Hashem is there. So if you do something wrong, you can never hide out from Hashem. But you could escape from the king rather than have to try to hide from Hashem and doing this wrong act. Better attempt an escape from the king. You'll be successful. You'll avoid having to give over Jews to their death. This was the two similar cases, two of these great tzaddikim, and the Gemara shows, above all, as the Gemara will bring later on to continue this phase about the Rabbi Arizal, how pure he was, that in all his actions he showed that he was a complete, perfect, pure tzaddik. We'll have more on this. It's for us to take a deep lesson from these tzaddikim, to emulate them, to copy their actions, to try to be like them, but above all else, to have a complete, implicit faith in these tzaddikim. Emunah tzaddikim is in the same par as Emunah b'Hashem. We should be zocher to this Emunah shleimah. And in the Zechut Emunah, we should be zocher to see the Binyan Bet HaMikdash, B'yat Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'hirat Yamin Amen V'Yamin.